Okay, hi, we're going to have a series on nutrition heroes. This is our first nutrition hero. We're going to talk about Dr Kempner MD. Dr Kempner trained in Germany with Otto Varburg, the famous Nobel Prize winning biochemist who discovered the Warburg effect, whereby he was studying how mitochondria are dysfunctional in cancer. Especially with the context of hypoxia and how the cancer cell tends to rely primarily on glycolysis for metabolism rather than going through electron transport in the mitochondria where you can produce a lot more ATP. He had to flee Germany in the 1930s due to the problems there. He came to America and worked in North Carolina at Duke Hospital, and he had made the observation that populations like in Asia that ate a rice-based diet, they were eating at that time 80 to 90% rice, they were very healthy, very thin, very low incidence coronary artery disease or hypertension or diabetes. So he had a patient out in North Carolina, a fat lady, and he just recommended a rice diet for her, and she did remarkably well, lost a lot of weight and became healthier. So he started to put more and more patients on a rice diet. And he was just using white rice. And he did a good job of documenting his patient. There's a pretty good biography. You can buy it. It was written by a lady doctor. At the moment, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but a lady doctor who worked with him. Her biography is good, a little bit too much friendship, gossipy stuff. I wish there was more about the medical, but there's pretty good coverage of the medical. Anyways. He did a pretty good job of documenting his patients. He followed over 19,000 patients. His rice diet in North Carolina was super famous. Celebrities would fly in from all over the place to be treated by him. It was a very low sodium diet, approximately 150 to 200 milligrams per day. That is super low sodium, because sometimes you're going to hear people say, oh, low sodium diet, 2,000 milligrams or less. No, no, no. 2,000 milligrams is 10 times higher than what his patients were eating. Also, the Yanomamo population in South America, Amazon jungle, they're only eating about 200 milligrams a day of sodium. And you know what their incidence of hypertension is in their 70s? Approximately 0. It's so low it's not even funny. In America, people consider it normal aging to be hypertensive. Well, if you keep your sodium in this low range, you got a good chance to not ever develop hypertension in your life. What else did he feed the patients? He fed them primarily white rice, and he would rinse it in water to get all the sodium off. He wanted sodium to be as low as possible. Sodium is a problem. Sodium is a vasoconstrictor. It inhibits endothelial nitric oxide. And when arteries vasoconstrict, that's like pumping, the blood through a narrow diameter system. The blood pressure has to come up. Plant foods in general are very good for blood pressure because plant foods are high in potassium. Potassium is a vasodilator. It opens up arteries. So pressure can come down because all the tubes, all the pipes, all the arteries are open. In addition to feeding them white rice, he also let the patients eat a pretty good amount of fruits and fruit juice. And he had fantastic results. He had many patients hypertensive in the 200s come down to very good, reasonable blood pressures. Many of his diabetic patients dramatically improved. Lots of his patients lost tons of weight. If you look at populations that eat rice-based diets, they're all skinny. Obesity is almost non-existent in populations that eat 80% or more of their calories from rice. Look at China before 1975. Look at Vietnam before 1970. Look at a Bruce Lee movie, and just look at all the experts. Don't look at Bolo. I know Bolo was like a bodybuilder, so he was taking all kinds of other foods besides just eating a rice diet. But you look at all the extras, and probably many of them just eating a rice diet, they're all skinny. Other things about Dr Kempner, his rice-based diet was about 95-5. 95-5 means 90% carbohydrate, 5% fat, and 5% protein. And so this is an example of a very low protein diet. In general, let's say a 100% vegan diet is low protein, probably about 10% protein typically, 80-10-10. But this rice-based diet, because rice is very low in protein, and fruits are super low in protein, is going to be 95-5. And by the way, all healthy populations eat starch-based diets, and rice is almost the perfect food. Rice has been messed up because of the problem with arsenic. Unfortunately, the chicken farmers had a problem with parasites in the intestinal tract of the chickens. So they would give them an arsenic-based medicine to treat the intestinal parasites. And they noticed that the chickens would stay fresh looking in the store longer. So they liked giving their chickens arsenic. Then they took the chicken poop and they sold it to rice farmers. And rice farmers started to use that as a fertilizer. And unfortunately, the rice plant just sucks up the arsenic. So you've taken a perfect food, rice, and contaminated it with arsenic. I still think it's okay to eat rice a couple times a week. It's better, supposedly, if you get it from areas that never grew cotton. Southeastern United States used to grow cotton, which was a textile product, so they could spray a lot more pesticides on it. In particular, they would put arsenic-based pesticides on those Southeastern United States rice crops because they had a problem with boll weevils, and a textile product they could spray more, but it takes decades to get that out of the soil. There's some other companies that boast low levels of arsenic in their rice, and it's not just in rice, it's in chicken and it's in lots of other foods. But that's the reason why I don't eat rice every day anymore, even though I used to and I would like to, because I love rice. Other things to know about rice: if you're going to cook rice, when you cook it in a stainless steel container, first of all, rinse it with reverse osmosis water. Rinse it twice to get a lot of the arsenic off. And then when you cook it, cook it in stainless steel. Don't go cook it in those Teflon non-stick coating things, because they put other like PFOS, PFAS in there, other things you don't want in your food. Okay, so cook it in stainless steel. It's the best thing to cook on. What else can we say? The rice-based diet is very low in fat, which helps prevent atherosclerosis. He kept track of the EKGs on his patient, and he showed some EKG reversals where the EKGs would revert back to being more normal. So this is one of the early examples of evidence suggesting reversal of coronary artery disease based on diet. There were subsequent authors who've shown similar findings, like Blankenhorn, Pritikin, Ornish, and of course Esselstyn's the most famous, okay, for showing reversal of coronary artery disease with a 100% plant-based diet. That is also low in sodium and no caffeine. I recommend no caffeine. Caffeine elevates the stress hormone, so you're going to increase cortisol, which causes insulin resistance, and the catecholamines also causing insulin resistance. Okay, what else about the rice diet? It's low in protein, as we said, 5% protein. Well, a low protein diet protects the kidneys. Nitrogen is only present in protein. There's no nitrogen in fats. There's no nitrogen in carbohydrates. So by eating this low protein diet, the kidney's main job is to excrete nitrogen. And when you dramatically lower the dietary intake of nitrogen, you make life a lot easier for the kidneys, and that was helpful. He treated a lot of kidney failure patients. They didn't even have dialysis back when he started, and that would prolong the patient's ability to stay off dialysis or to die. Basically, if a person with, let's say, reduced glomerular filtration capacity, GFR, glomerular filtration rate, if they can keep their nitrogen intake below their GFR, their levels of their lab values will improve. So that's a major goal for a person with partial kidney failure, kidney insufficiency, is to reduce their dietary intake of nitrogen. Another advantage of eating a plant-based diet in a patient with renal insufficiency is that you also avoid other nitrogens. A human or an animal with the meat, it's going to have creatinine and creatine inside the cells. Creatine is a way to have immediately available energy, the ATP system. And it's sort of like a buffer for AP, intracellular and skeletal muscle. So the point is, when you avoid meat, you avoid creatine, and creatinine is sort of the waste product of creatine. So you thus also make life better for the kidneys. In addition, fruits and plant-based diet is very alkaline. The reason is anything that's low in protein, and this is super low protein diet, is going to be low in acid. The job of the kidney is, number one, primarily to excrete nitrogen, but number two is to excrete acid. And so when you lower the acid load on the kidneys, you protect the kidneys. You maintain kidney failure much longer. Anything that's low in protein is going to tend to be very low in its acid. And that's because what is protein made out of? It's made out of amino acids. Every amino acid has a carboxylic acid on it. Now, fatty acids are not that acidic. Most dietary fat comes in the form of triglycerides, and the fatty acids in a triglyceride are esterified to glycerol, therefore they're not actively acidic. And carbohydrates have primarily hydroxy groups on them, so they're not significantly acidic either. You get a little bit of acidity coming in the form of phosphates, which are more common in meats and in processed foods as well, and things like soda pop. But the bottom line is this is a wonderful diet for protecting those kidneys. You dramatically drop the nitrogen load from dropping the protein, and you drop the acid load. Plus, meat protein is much more acidic than plant protein because meat protein is more methionine and it has more cysteine, sulfur-containing amino acid groups, and those are partially metabolized, those sulfurs, to sulfuric acid. And then the pH has to be buffered by taking calcium from the bone, some from the muscle as well, but that calcium is then excreted in the kidneys because calcium excretion in the kidneys is coupled to also pumping out hydrogen protons to thus readjust the pH. But that increased calcium excretion in the urine predisposes to calcium precipitating in the kidney tubules, causing worsening kidney failure. Also, a big precipitation of calcium in the kidneys with calciuria predisposes to kidney stones, which is a very unpleasant experience. Okay, what else was in here of interest? He kept some of these patients as inpatients initially for up to 3.5 weeks because some of those patients were very sick. Probably the most complex patients were the kidney failure patients because their excretion of electrolytes would be more hard to predict. So you have to follow their labs on a daily basis much more closely. You have to be careful about things. For a regular person, they can eat lots and lots of plants and all the extra potassium. The kidney is good at excreting potassium. Our ancestors, let's say thousands of years ago, would eat tons of plants with lots of potassium and very little sodium. This is what we're naturally made to eat. And therefore, they could excrete that potassium easily. But a kidney failure patient might have difficulty excreting all that potassium. So that's why that's relevant. So anyways, in addition, they followed some of Walter Kempner's patients, put them in metabolic wards, and tried to watch them closely, check for deficiencies, and they were remarkably healthy. And that was also a big learning lesson from his patients is just how well they did. And he presented in some national meetings. He published his articles in journal articles. You can look up the journal articles of Walter Kempner MD, and it's rather extraordinary. What's the bad thing about the Walter Kempner rice diet? It's boring, but look at Asia. People were routinely eating 80 to 90% rice. To somebody who's not used to eating that much rice, it sounds boring. And as a matter of fact, I used to eat rice every single night. And this one lady who I work with said to me one day, "Dr. Rogers, you eat rice every single time I see you at night on call. Aren't you sick of it? If I had to eat rice every night, I would be so disgusted with it. I would feel like I was going to puke if I had to eat rice every night." I said, you know what? Eating rice every day is not a big deal. A lot of people eat rice 3 times a day. It's like water. The real challenge is sleeping with the same woman every night. Okay, that's not so funny. But anyways, Walter Kempner, 95.5, rice-based diet, incredible results. Marked reduction in hypertension, which had some improvement in CHF patients. He had eye grounds exams of the patient's eyes that had been injured by, for example, let's say diabetic retinopathy, hypertensive retinopathy. Some of them significantly improved. Incredible. So, worth learning more about, and it shows the power of a low sodium, low fat, low protein diet.